that, Jonathan. I can see that. Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Major Graham Hales. Today, we remember and commemorate the 74th anniversary of victory in the Pacific Day. In the afternoon of the 15th of August 1945, Japan's Emperor Hirohito announced his nation's acceptance of the Allies' terms of surrender as outlined in the Potsdam Agreement. It was more than 3.5 years since Japanese troops had invaded Malaya and bombed Pearl Harbor. News of Japan's surrender produced spontaneous celebrations in public places in Australia, the United States, and war-ravaged Asia and Europe. The Second World War was over. Japan's formal surrender took place on the 2nd of September, when their delegation signed the documents of surrender aboard USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, marking the official end of the Second World War. The war had spread across the globe, and there had been widespread death and devastation. Over 70 million soldiers and civilians had died as a result. In the Asia-Pacific theatre, Australia suffered over 9,000 fatal casualties, nearly 14,000 wounded, and over 21,000 prisoners of war. Today, we pay our respects to the 40,000 Australian men and women who died as a result of their service during the Second World War, and who are commemorated here on the Roll of Honour, and to the survivors who returned home. We will recall the story of just one today, Captain Domenic George Picone, Australian Army Medical Corps, who was killed on the 27th of August 1945. This evening, we acknowledge Mr. John King, President, ACT Branch of the Return and Services League of Australia. We also acknowledge the Afghanistan delegation that are joining us for the ceremony this evening. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge members of RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. And during this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, Windale Public School, and from Victoria, Commandi Primary School. Australia's Federation Guard is a tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catafalque party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier within the Hall of Memory.
present. Party reverse. Party rest on.
If you're able, I invite you all to please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Party attention. Party present. Arms.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are young and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is birth by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty rich and rare. In history's page let every state advance Australia fair. In joyful strains then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Party shoulder. Arms. Party order. Arms.
Students, you may be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Reeds and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Captain Domenic George Picone. Domenic Picone was born in Perth on the 14th of March 1909, the son of Anthony and Mary Picone. Known as Dom, he graduated at Melbourne University in 1936. Initially a pharmacist, by the time of the Second World War, he was working as a GP in the town of Cooroy in Queensland. Around mid-1940, Picone decided to enlist. With his experience as a medical practitioner, he was a natural fit for the Australian Army Medical Corps. By July, he had been promoted to captain, and shortly afterwards, he was attached to the 2nd 10th Field Regiment, which had just been formed in Brisbane as one of the 8th Division's 3 artillery regiments. Towards the end of the year, the unit conducted field manoeuvres and trained with 18-pounder guns from the First World War. After a period of leave in November and attending a course on tropical hygiene early in the new year, in early February, Picone and his comrades travelled by train to Sydney. Arriving at Circular Quay, they then boarded the Queen Mary, which had been converted from a passenger ship to a troop ship. The Queen Mary was part of a convoy taking troops of the 8th Division to Malaya and Singapore. The regiment took up residence at the Malacca High School and the school at Tranquilla, and for the next few months, groups were rotated between both locations. The regiment trained and carried out manoeuvres at Mersing, where it was located when Japan entered the Second World War, beginning with the invasion of Malaya. In early September, Picone learned that his sister had died, and the following month he was given a period of special leave. In January 1942, the regiment's position was bombed and strafed for the first time by Japanese aircraft. Japanese troops were able to quickly advance through Malaya, and by January they had entered Johor. The regiment first went into action on the 21st of January, when it was called upon to bring down artillery fire on Japanese troops along the Mersing and Dao Road. The Japanese force was cut off a platoon from the 2nd 20th Battalion, but the regiment's fire allowed the platoon to escape. The 2nd 10th was in action from then on, firing on targets in the Mayang Estate and Layang Hill, providing support for the 22nd Brigade's successful ambush in the Nithsdale Estate, and then withdrawing to Singapore Island. By the 12th of February, Commonwealth troops had withdrawn to the city. The 2nd 10th remained in action, firing 2,100 rounds on Bukit Timah village. The next day, the regiment moved to the Tanglin Golf Course, where it became under enemy artillery fire and airstrikes. The regiment ceased firing at 10:30 p.m. on the 14th of February, and the next day, the garrison surrendered. Most of the Australians captured in Singapore moved into Changi, where they occupied Selarang Barracks. For many, this was just a transit stop, as working parties were soon dispatched to other camps in Singapore and Malaya. Picone was one of almost 1,500 prisoners placed in B Force. The group was transported from Changi on the 7th of July 1942 on board the transport ship Ibi Maru, arriving at Sandakan Harbour almost a fortnight later. At Sandakan, the men worked to construct an airfield and prison of war camps. Allied air raids on Sandakan began in October 1944. The airfield was bombed and strafed, and about 60 Japanese aircraft on the ground were destroyed. On Christmas Day 1944, B-24 Liberators finally put the airfield out of commission. From the beginning, conditions had been harsh. Men were confined to a cage for periods from a few days to many weeks for minor infringements, and subjected to repeated brutal bashings and starvation. Rations rapidly dwindled in 1944, and general health deteriorated. Minimal food and brutal treatment at the hands of Taiwanese guards and Japanese soldiers exacerbated the impact of tropical diseases. The death rate climbed. At one point, Captain Picone was caught taking a light bulb to light his surgical hut in order to perform an emergency operation on a patient with a ruptured ulcer. He was beaten and forced to stand at attention for 2 hours while the patient lay bleeding in darkness on the operating table. On the 28th of January, the first forced march began, starting at Sandakan and ending near a village at Renu, some 260 kilometres to the west. 470 prisoners thought fit enough to carry baggage and supplies for the Japanese battalions relocating to the western coast were selected. They were all malnourished or suffering serious illness and had meagre rations for the trip. Those who collapsed from exhaustion or sickness were killed or left to die. The next group of 536 prisoners, including Picone, left in late May, arriving at Renault a month later. On the 9th of June, another 75 men were sent. They were so weak that none survived beyond 50 kilometres. As each collapsed from exhaustion, he was shot by a Japanese guard. Those left at Sandakan who could not walk were killed or died of starvation and sickness. By the end of July, there were 38 prisoners left alive at Renault. 2 days after the Japanese surrendered, on the 15th of August 1945, aircraft dropped leaflets with the news into the jungle. Only 15 prisoners were now alive. On the 27th of July 1945, a Japanese guard had warned Warrant Officer William Sipowicz that the Japanese were planning to execute the surviving prisoners. Sipowicz told 4 men, including Captain Picone, and offered them the opportunity to escape with him. All 4 turned down this offer. Domenic Picone and 14 other survivors of the infamous Sandakan death marches were shot by Japanese guards on the 27th of August 1945. The war had ended, but Allied forces had not arrived to liberate the prisoners at Renault. During the course of the war, the members of Dominic's immediate family had died. While he had mourned the death of his sister, Domenic Picone had no opportunity to learn about the death of his mother Mary or his father Anthony on the 17th of August 1942 and the 29th of May 1945, respectively. Today, Captain Picone is commemorated at the Lebanon War Cemetery. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Captain Domenic George Picone, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
If you're able, please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
Party, shoulder, arms.
They shall grow, not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Party present. Arms. Party shoulder. Arms.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Party outwards. Turn. Party quick. Arch.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.